The sound of hoofbeats pounded against the dry earth, as Olivia Miller clutched her swollen belly, the pain of labor intensifying with each jolt of the rickety wagon. It was 1876, and what should have been a journey of hope toward a new life in Colorado territory had become a desperate race against time, as her baby decided to come 6 weeks early on the unforgiving frontier. "Please stop the wagon," Olivia gasped, her knuckles white as she gripped the wooden side panel. Her husband Thomas barely acknowledged her plea, his eyes fixed grimly on the horizon as their oxen trudged forward. He had been this way for months now, distant, cold, driven by demons she couldn't reach. "We'll stop when we reach the next town," Thomas muttered, not even turning to look at his suffering wife. "We're losing daylight." Olivia bit back a sob as another contraction tore through her body. The wagon train they had been traveling with had gone ahead 3 days prior, when Thomas's drinking had delayed their departure from the last settlement. Now they were alone on the trail, miles from civilization, and her baby was coming whether Thomas accepted it or not. "The baby is coming now," she cried out, doubling over in pain. "Thomas, please." When he finally glanced back, his bloodshot eyes widened at the sight of the dampness spreading beneath her skirts. With a reluctant grumble, he pulled the oxen to a halt and climbed down from the driver's bench, his movements unsteady from the whiskey he'd been nursing since dawn. "This is all we need," he muttered, helping her down with rough hands. "Just perfect timing as always." Olivia could hardly respond through her pain. At 22, she had imagined a very different life than this, married to a man who had once been kind, but whose promises of a prosperous future had evaporated like morning dew under the harsh western sun. Thomas helped her beneath the wagon, the only shelter available on the open prairie, before returning to the bottle tucked beneath the seat. Hours passed in a haze of agony. The sun began to set, painting the vast sky in brilliant oranges and pinks that Olivia barely noticed as she labored alone under the wagon, using her shawl as a makeshift blanket on the hard ground. Thomas had wandered off, muttering about finding firewood, but she knew he was avoiding the reality of their situation just as he avoided everything difficult in their lives. As darkness fell and the prairie winds picked up, Olivia's cries went unanswered by her absent husband. The stars emerged one by one, cold and distant witnesses to her suffering. She was certain she would die here, she and her baby both, when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart leap with fear and hope. "Hello, anybody there?" a deep voice called out. "Under the wagon," Olivia managed between contractions. "Please help." Boot steps approached and a tall figure crouched down to peer beneath the wagon. In the fading light, Olivia could make out the silhouette of a man in a wide-brimmed hat. "Madam, good Lord," he exclaimed, taking in her condition. "Where's your husband?" "Gone," she gasped. "The baby's coming now." Without hesitation, the stranger removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves. "My name's Lucas Reid. I've helped birth plenty of foals and calves, but never a human baby. Still, I reckon the principle's not too different." His calm, steady voice was like an anchor in Olivia's storm of pain. As another contraction seized her, Lucas crawled under the wagon and positioned himself to help. "You're doing fine, madam, just fine. What's your name?" "Olivia," she whispered, grateful for this stranger's kindness. "Well, Olivia, I'm going to help you through this. You're not alone anymore." For the next hour, Lucas guided her through the birth with surprising competence, his voice never faltering even when Olivia thought she couldn't bear another moment. When at last her daughter slipped into his waiting hands beneath that wagon, the baby's first cry pierced the prairie night like a promise. "You've got a beautiful little girl," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped the infant in his own clean bandana. then in his shirt. He helped clean both mother and child as best he could with his canteen water, moving with gentle efficiency. It was then that Thomas finally returned, stumbling and reeking of whiskey. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, peering under the wagon at the scene before him. Lucas emerged, straightening to his full height, a good head taller than Thomas. "The man who just helped your wife deliver your child while you were off drinking yourself blind." Thomas's face contorted with anger and shame. "This is my family, my business." Lucas's jaw tightened as he looked from Thomas to Olivia and the newborn still under the wagon. "From what I can see, sir, you've been neglecting your business." Thomas lunged clumsily at Lucas, who sidestepped easily, causing Thomas to stumble and fall face first into the dirt. The pathetic display seemed to drain whatever fight remained in him. "Take her then," Thomas slurred, struggling to his feet. "Take them both. I never wanted this life anyway." He staggered toward the wagon, pulled himself up to the driver's seat, and snapped the reins. The oxen, confused by the sudden command, began to move forward. "Thomas!" Olivia cried out in disbelief. "Stop!" But he didn't look back, not even when Lucas ran after the wagon, shouting for him to halt. The wagon disappeared into the darkness, taking with it all of Olivia's possessions, her hopes for the future, and any illusions she still harbored about her marriage. Lucas returned to find Olivia sobbing beneath the wagon, clutching her newborn daughter to her chest. He knelt beside them, his expression a mixture of anger and compassion. "I'm sorry, Olivia, I truly am." He looked at the infant, then at Olivia's tear-streaked face. "You both deserve better than this." In that moment, with nothing but the clothes on her back and her newborn child in her arms, Olivia knew her life had irrevocably changed. And the tall cowboy with kind eyes who had delivered her daughter was now her only hope in a vast and unforgiving landscape. Lucas built a small fire and moved his bedroll under the wagon to provide some comfort for Olivia and the baby. He had been on his way back to his small ranch after delivering cattle to a nearby fort when he'd heard Olivia's cries. "My place is about a day's ride from here," he explained, heating some coffee over the fire. "It's not much, but there's a roof and 4 walls. You can stay there until you figure out what you want to do." Olivia looked down at her sleeping daughter's face, feeling simultaneously the most profound love and the most terrible fear. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted. "Thomas was taking us to his brother's place in Colorado, but I don't even know where it is exactly, and after what he did." "No decent man abandons his wife and newborn child," Lucas said firmly. "Whatever happens, I promise you won't face it alone." As dawn broke over the prairie, Lucas helped Olivia onto his horse, carefully placing the baby in her arms. He walked alongside, leading the horse at a gentle pace to avoid jostling the new mother and infant. "What will you name her?" he asked, nodding toward the bundle in Olivia's arms. Olivia looked down at her daughter's tiny face. "I think I'll call her Hope, because that's what I need right now." Lucas nodded approvingly. "Hope, that's a fine name for a prairie girl." They traveled slowly throughout the day, stopping frequently for Olivia to rest and feed the baby. Lucas proved to be as gentle as he was resourceful, fashioning a sling from his spare shirt so Olivia could carry Hope more comfortably against her chest. As the sun began its descent, a small homestead came into view, a modest cabin with a barn and corral set against a backdrop of rolling hills. "It's not much," Lucas said, almost apologetically, "but it's home." To Olivia, after days of traveling in a wagon and giving birth beneath one, the simple cabin looked like a palace. Inside, Lucas quickly set about making the place comfortable, giving up his bed for Olivia and the baby while he prepared a simple meal of beans and biscuits. As they ate, Olivia learned that Lucas had come west 5 years earlier after the Civil War, where he'd served as a cavalry scout. He'd built this place with his own hands and ran a small herd of cattle with occasional work as a guide for the army. "No wife?" Olivia asked, then immediately blushed at her forwardness. Lucas smiled slightly. "No, never found the right woman willing to put up with this hard life." His eyes drifted to Hope, sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle he'd fashioned from a wooden box lined with blankets. "Children need stability, something I couldn't guarantee until recently." Over the next few days, Olivia recovered her strength while Lucas went about his chores, always making time to check on her and the baby. He brought in a neighbor woman, Mrs. Abernathy, from 5 miles away to help with things a man wouldn't know about new mothers. The older woman provided practical advice and helped Olivia with clothing for herself and the baby from her own children's hand-me-downs. "That Lucas is a good man," Mrs. Abernathy told Olivia one afternoon as they hung laundry. "Been out here on his own too long. Needs a family to soften those rough edges." Olivia didn't respond, but she had noticed the gentle way Lucas handled Hope, and how his normally serious face would break into a smile when the baby wrapped her tiny fingers around his calloused thumb. As weeks passed, Olivia began to contribute to the household, cooking meals and keeping the cabin tidy. She learned to milk the cow Lucas kept and even attempted to make cheese under Mrs. Abernathy's guidance. Though her first efforts were disastrous, Lucas ate the lumpy, over-salted results without complaint. "Best cheese I've ever had," he declared with such sincerity that Olivia couldn't help but laugh, her first real laugh since before Hope's birth. The sound seemed to transform Lucas's face, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he joined in her laughter. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of shared joy that hinted at possibilities neither was ready to name. One evening, as summer began to fade toward autumn, Lucas returned from town with supplies and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For Hope," he said, handing it to Olivia with uncharacteristic shyness. Inside was a tiny silver rattle, simple but beautifully crafted. "Lucas, this must have cost. She should have something pretty," he interrupted, his eyes fixed on the baby who was now almost 2 months old and beginning to focus on the world around her. "Every little girl deserves something pretty." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. This man who owed her nothing had shown more care for her daughter than Hope's own father ever had. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to express the fullness of her gratitude. That night, after Hope was asleep, Olivia found Lucas sitting on the porch steps, staring at the stars. "I need to talk to you about our arrangement," she said, sitting beside him. "I can't impose on your kindness forever." Lucas turned to her, his face half illuminated by the lantern hanging by the door. "You're not imposing, having you and Hope here. It's made this place feel like a home for the first time. Even so, I need to make my own way, for Hope's sake." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "The nearest town with opportunities for a woman on her own is 60 miles away, and even there your options would be limited. I could work as a seamstress or perhaps in a boarding house, or," Lucas interrupted gently, "you could stay here, as my wife." The proposal hung in the air between them, unexpected and profound. "Lucas, it wouldn't have to be a real marriage," he hurried to add. "Not unless you wanted that someday. But it would give you and Hope protection, a name. No one would question your presence here, and I'd provide for you both." Olivia studied his face, this man who had saved her and her daughter with no thought of reward. "Why would you do this?" "Because I care about what happens to you, both of you." His voice was rough with emotion. "And selfishly, I've grown accustomed to not being alone. I can't accept charity, even disguised as marriage." "It's not charity, Olivia. You'd be doing me a service too. This place needs a woman's touch. And I. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I need someone to remind me why all this work matters. Olivia thought of her first marriage, entered into with romantic dreams that had crumbled under the weight of reality. This proposal was different, honest, practical, yet not without tenderness. I'll need time to think about it, she said finally. Lucas nodded, seeming relieved she hadn't rejected the idea outright. Take all the time you need. For 3 days, Olivia considered Lucas's proposal from every angle. She watched him with hope, saw how his face softened when he held her, how he would hum quietly to soothe her when she fussed. She noticed the way he always ensured Olivia had eaten before he did, how he brought in extra firewood so she wouldn't have to go out in the cool autumn mornings. On the 4th day, Olivia found Lucas in the barn repairing a saddle. Yes, she said simply. He looked up, his hand stilling on the leather. Yes, I'll marry you, Lucas, for hope's sake, and she took a deep breath, for mine as well. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his usually serious features. I'll do right by you both, Olivia. That's a promise. They were married the following Sunday by a circuit preacher who had stopped at the Abernathy farm. The ceremony was simple, just the preacher, the Abernathys as witnesses, and Hope sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Abernathy's arms. Olivia wore a blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Abernathy's daughter, and Lucas had shaved his beard and worn his one good shirt. I now pronounce you man and wife, the preacher declared, and Lucas hesitantly took Olivia's hand in his. There was no passionate kiss, just a gentle squeeze of her fingers and a look of quiet commitment that touched Olivia more deeply than any romantic gesture from her first husband ever had. That night, Lucas insisted on sleeping in the barn, giving Olivia and Hope the cabin to themselves. Nothing has to change, he reminded her. This is for appearances and legal protection, nothing more. But things did change gradually and naturally. Lucas began to take his meals with Olivia rather than eating quickly before returning to work. They developed evening rituals, reading aloud from one of the few books he owned, or simply talking about their days. He taught her to play checkers, and she taught him songs from her childhood in Ohio. As Hope grew, so did their comfortable companionship. By the time the first snow fell, marking Hope's 4th month of life, Olivia realized she was happy, truly happy for the first time in years. Winter on the prairie brought its own challenges. The small cabin felt smaller when blizzards forced them inside for days at a time. Lucas still slept in the barn most nights, though Olivia had insisted he take the cabin during the worst storms, while she and Hope shared the small alcove Lucas had built as a separate sleeping area. It was during one such storm, with wind howling around the cabin and snow piling against the windows, that Hope came down with a fever. Her small body burned hot against Olivia's chest, her usual lusty cries reduced to pitiful whimpers. "Lucas," Olivia called, fear making her voice sharp. "Something's wrong with Hope." He was at her side instantly, his hand gentle as he felt the baby's forehead. "She's burning up. We need to cool her down." Together they worked through the night, taking turns holding Hope, bathing her tiny body with cool water and trying to get her to nurse. By dawn, the fever hadn't broken and Lucas's face was grim. "We need the doctor," he said, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "The nearest one's in Timberline, 15 miles from here." "You can't go out in this," Olivia protested, though her eyes betrayed her desperate hope that he would try. Lucas was already pulling on his heavy coat and wrapping a scarf around his face. "I have to. She's just a baby, Olivia. She can't fight this on her own." Before Olivia could argue further, he had knelt beside her, his gloved hand gently touching Hope's flushed cheek. "You hold on, little one. Your pa's going to bring back help." The words "your pa" brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. In that moment, she knew that whatever arrangement they had started with, Lucas truly considered Hope his own. "Please be careful," she whispered as he headed for the door. "Keep the fire going and try to get her to take some water if she'll have it. I'll be back as soon as I can." The hours after Lucas left were the longest of Olivia's life. Hope's condition worsened, her breathing becoming labored, her little body alternating between burning hot and frighteningly cool. Olivia prayed as she had never prayed before, begging God to spare her daughter and to bring Lucas safely back with help. Night had fallen again when Olivia heard the sound of horses approaching. She rushed to the door, hope clutched to her chest, to find Lucas dismounting alongside an older man with a medical bag. "Dr. Pullman," Lucas said, ushering the snow-covered doctor inside. "This is my wife Olivia and our daughter Hope." The doctor wasted no time, taking the baby from Olivia's arms and examining her thoroughly. "Lung fever," he diagnosed grimly. "We need to clear her chest and break the fever." For the next 2 days, they followed the doctor's instructions, meticulously steamed tents made from blankets over a pot of boiling water infused with pine needles, mustard plasters on Hope's tiny chest, and a medicine the doctor had brought that smelled terrible but seemed to ease her breathing. Lucas never left their side, taking shifts with Olivia to hold Hope upright so she could breathe more easily. His strong hands, usually so confident with ranch work, were achingly gentle as they supported the baby's head and back. On the 3rd morning, Hope's fever finally broke. She opened her eyes that had begun to turn from newborn blue to a hazel that matched Lucas's and made a small noise that sounded almost like contentment. The doctor, who had stayed through the worst of it, packed his bag with a satisfied nod. "She's a fighter, this one. Takes after her father." Neither Olivia nor Lucas corrected him. In every way that mattered, Lucas was Hope's father not by blood, but by choice and devotion. After the doctor left, promising to return in a week to check on his patient, Lucas collapsed into a chair, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Olivia placed the now sleeping Hope in her cradle and went to him, kneeling beside his chair. "Thank you," she said, taking his rough hands in hers, "for saving her, again." Lucas looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I couldn't bear to lose her, either of you." The raw honesty in his voice broke something open in Olivia's heart. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, their first real kiss. Lucas froze for an instant before his hands came up to cradle her face with exquisite tenderness. When they finally parted, his eyes searched hers questioningly. "I'm not confused or just grateful," Olivia whispered, answering his unspoken concern. "I know my own heart, Lucas, and it belongs to you now." That night, for the first time, Lucas didn't sleep in the barn or on the floor by the fire. He shared the bed with Olivia, holding her close as they both listened to Hope's now steady breathing from her cradle nearby. There was no rush to physical intimacy, both were too exhausted from their ordeal with Hope, but the emotional intimacy of lying together, his arms around her and her head on his chest, felt like coming home. As winter gave way to spring, their relationship deepened and changed. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience transformed into a true marriage in every sense. Lucas proved to be a considerate and tender lover, always attuned to Olivia's comfort and pleasure. Their physical connection mirrored the emotional bond that had been growing between them for months. Hope thrived under their combined care, growing into a cheerful baby who reached for Lucas as readily as she did for Olivia. Her first word was "Mama," but Dada followed just days later, bringing a look of such profound joy to Lucas's face that Olivia had to turn away to hide her tears. With the arrival of spring came new possibilities. Lucas's small herd had weathered the winter well, and the calving season promised to increase their numbers significantly. The vegetable garden Olivia had started the previous summer could be expanded, and Lucas spoke of adding rooms to the cabin now that their family was established. "I want to build a proper home," he told Olivia one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Hope played with wooden blocks at their feet. "Something that will last, that Hope can be proud of as she grows." "She'll be proud because it's yours," Olivia said, leaning against his shoulder. "Just as I am." Lucas's arm tightened around her. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "After the war, I didn't think I deserved a family." "Why?" Olivia asked, though she had learned that Lucas rarely spoke of his time in the conflict that had torn the nation apart. He was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. "I did things," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "Things a man can't easily live with afterward." Scouting wasn't just about finding trails. Sometimes it meant finding people who didn't want to be found. Olivia turned to face him, seeing the shadows of old pain in his eyes. "The war asked terrible things of men on both sides. It's why I came west," he continued. "Thought maybe I could build something good to balance the destruction. But it was lonely work until—" His eyes moved to Hope, who had abandoned her blocks to crawl toward a butterfly that had landed nearby. "Until you two came along and made it worthwhile." Olivia took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You are a good man, Lucas Reed. Whatever happened before, I know your heart now. And it's a heart any woman would be proud to call her husband's, any child would be blessed to call her father's." The kiss he gave her then was full of gratitude and a love that needed no words to express its depth. The months passed in a rhythm of work and family life. Lucas taught Olivia to ride and shoot, essential skills for a woman on the frontier, while she expanded her knowledge of gardening and preserving food for the winter ahead. Hope took her first steps chasing a chicken in the yard, her delighted laughter bringing both parents running to witness the milestone. In town, they were accepted without question as a family. If anyone suspected that Hope wasn't Lucas's biological child, no one mentioned it. To the small community, they were simply the Reeds' hard-working ranch folk with a beautiful daughter and a visible devotion to each other that many longer married couples might envy. It was during a trip to town for supplies that they first heard rumors of Thomas Miller. He had apparently been working as a hired hand on ranches throughout the territory, drinking away his wages and telling anyone who would listen about the wife who had run off with a cowboy, taking his child with her. "He's asking about you, Mr. Peterson," the storekeeper, told them in a low voice as he wrapped their purchases. "Was in here 2 weeks back, showing a poor likeness of you, Mrs. Reed. Said you stole his money and child." Olivia's hand trembled as she clutched Hope closer. "He abandoned us," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Left us under a wagon with nothing but the clothes on our backs. No one who knows you would believe his tales," Peterson assured them, "but he's been making trouble in other towns. Thought you should know he might be headed this way eventually." Lucas's face had hardened into a mask that reminded Olivia of the serious, guarded man who had first found her under that wagon. "Thank you for the warning," he said, his hand protectively at the small of Olivia's back as they left the store. The ride home was silent, both lost in their own thoughts about what Thomas's reappearance might mean for their family. That night after Hope was asleep, Lucas finally spoke of his fears. "If he comes here making claims on you or Hope, he has no claims," Olivia interrupted fiercely. "He left us to die." "The law might see it differently," Lucas said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "A man has rights to his wife and child, even if he's the worst kind of scoundrel. You're Hope's father in every way that matters, Olivia insisted, gripping his hands. And I'm your wife now, truly and completely. Lucas pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I can't lose you, he whispered. Either of you. You won't, she promised, though she knew it wasn't entirely in her power to keep. For weeks, they lived with the shadow of Thomas's possible return hanging over them. Lucas was more vigilant than ever, keeping his rifle cleaned and loaded, teaching Olivia additional shooting skills, and making sure she was never alone when he had to ride out to check on distant parts of their growing ranch. It was a beautiful autumn day when Thomas finally appeared. Olivia was hanging laundry while Hope, now a sturdy toddler of 15 months, played in a pen Lucas had built to keep her safe from the chickens she loved to chase. Lucas had ridden out at dawn to help a neighbor round up stray cattle, but had promised to be back by midday. The sound of an approaching horse made Olivia look up, expecting to see her husband. Instead, a gaunt figure on a half-starved horse came into view. Thomas Miller, barely recognizable from the man who had abandoned her nearly a year and a half before. Well, well, he called out, his voice slurred despite the early hour. If it isn't my loving wife and child. Olivia quickly moved to stand between Thomas and Hope's play area. I'm not your wife anymore, Thomas. I've remarried. Thomas dismounted unsteadily, his bloodshot eyes taking in the prosperous little ranch with obvious envy. Didn't waste any time, did you? Shacked up with that cowboy who was sniffing around you. Lucas is my husband now, legally and properly, Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. And he's Hope's father. Thomas spat on the ground. That's my seed woman, my daughter. He took a step closer and Olivia could smell the whiskey on him. I've come to take what's mine. You have no rights here, Olivia said, edging toward the house where Lucas's spare pistol was kept. You abandoned us, left us with nothing. I was coming back, Thomas lied, his eyes darting around as if looking for something valuable to take. Got robbed on the road. By the time I made it back to where I left you, you were gone. Took up with that cowboy right quick, didn't you? Hope began to cry, frightened by the angry stranger. The sound seemed to focus Thomas's attention. That her, my girl. He lurched toward the pen, but Olivia blocked his path. Don't you dare touch her, she warned. She doesn't know you, you're nothing to her. Thomas's face contorted with rage. I'll show you who's nothing. He grabbed Olivia's arm roughly, trying to push her aside. The sound of a rifle being cocked froze them both. Take your hands off my wife, Lucas's voice commanded from the edge of the yard, where he sat on his horse with his rifle aimed squarely at Thomas. Thomas released Olivia but didn't back away. Your wife? That's a good joke. This woman is married to me and that's my child. Lucas dismounted smoothly, keeping the rifle trained on Thomas as he approached. The law says differently. I have a marriage certificate and adoption papers that say Hope is my daughter now. This was news to Olivia. She hadn't known Lucas had taken legal steps to adopt Hope. Papers can be challenged, Thomas said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. They can, Lucas agreed, his voice deadly calm. But first you'd have to explain to a judge why you abandoned a woman in labor under a wagon in the middle of nowhere. Why you took all her possessions and left her with nothing. Why you haven't provided a cent of support in over a year. Thomas's bravado was fading fast in the face of Lucas's unwavering stance. I have rights. You gave up your rights when you drove away that night, Lucas cut him off. Now I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully. There's nothing for you here. For a moment, it seemed Thomas might argue further, but something in Lucas's eyes, a cold determination that promised consequences if pushed, made him back down. Keep them then, he muttered, stumbling back toward his horse. Wasn't worth the trouble anyway. As Thomas mounted his horse, Lucas added, If you ever come near my family again, I won't be so generous. Spread the word that Olivia Miller is dead. Olivia Reed is under my protection now." Thomas glared at them both before spurring his horse and riding away, leaving a cloud of dust that gradually settled in the autumn air. The moment he was out of sight, Olivia ran to Hope, scooping her up and holding her tight while Lucas secured his rifle and came to wrap his arms around them both. "You're safe," he murmured, kissing the top of Olivia's head. "You're both safe." When her trembling had subsided, Olivia looked up at him. "Adoption papers." A slight flush colored Lucas's cheeks. "I should have told you. After we heard the rumors, I rode to the county seat and filed the paperwork. Judge Franklin knows me served with his son in the war. He expedited things. So legally. Hope is my daughter in the eyes of the law," Lucas confirmed, "and our marriage is properly registered. Thomas has no claim on either of you now." Tears filled Olivia's eyes, not of fear this time, but of overwhelming gratitude and love. "You thought of everything." "I told you I'd protect you both," he said simply. "That's what a man does for his family." That night, after Hope was asleep, they made love with a fierce tenderness born of the day's fears and the relief of danger past. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Olivia placed Lucas's hand on her stomach. "There might be more than just Hope to protect soon," she whispered. Lucas went still, then raised himself on one elbow to look down at her, his eyes questioning in the dim light from the banked fire. "Are you sure?" Olivia nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. 2 months now, I think. I wanted to be certain before I told you." The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "A baby," he breathed, wonder in his voice as he gently caressed her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Hope will have a brother or sister," Olivia said, her own happiness mirroring his. "A family, Lucas. A real family." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and joy into the gesture. "We've been a real family since the moment I found you under that wagon," he murmured against her lips. "This is just another blessing I never thought I'd deserve." Spring arrived with the birth of their son, whom they named William after Lucas's father. Hope, now nearly 2, approached her baby brother with solemn curiosity, declaring him tiny in her growing vocabulary before bestowing a gentle pat on his head that made both parents laugh. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under Lucas's careful management and Olivia's thrifty housekeeping. 2 more children joined their family, another son, James, and a daughter they named Elizabeth after Olivia's mother. Hope grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's gentle spirit and her adoptive father's steadfast determination. She never questioned her place in the family, secure in Lucas's love, which was no different for her than for the children of his blood. On the 20th anniversary of the day, Lucas had found Olivia beneath the wagon. They stood together on the porch of the large, comfortable home that had replaced the original cabin. Their children were nearly grown. Hope, already married to a young rancher from a neighboring property, William preparing to attend college back east, and the 2 younger ones busy with their own pursuits. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked, leaning against her husband's still strong shoulder as they watched the sunset painting the prairie gold. "That day when you heard my cries and found me under that wagon." Lucas's arm tightened around her waist, his other hand coming up to touch the silver that now threaded her dark hair. "I knew my life had changed the moment I saw you," he admitted. "I just didn't know how completely." "You told me we deserved better," Olivia reminded him. "Hope and I." "And you got it," he said with a smile. "This land, this home, our family." Olivia turned in his arms to face him, her hands framing the beloved face that had grown more dear to her with each passing year. "No, Lucas, we got you. That was the better that changed everything. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Lucas Reed kissed his wife in the gathering darkness, both of them secure in the knowledge that what had begun as an act of compassion beneath a prairie wagon had built a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of choosing family, choosing love, and choosing to create something beautiful out of life's harshest moments. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of the American West, their story of a baby born under a wagon and the cowboy who had promised them better became part of the land itself, a whispered legend of hope and second chances on the untamed frontier.